You're watching What Now? Let's turn attention now to Africa, where South Africa will temporarily step back from the G20 summit during the United States presidency in 2026, following a request from Washington. The decision comes after months of strained relations, which peaked when U.S. President Donald Trump boycotted last year's G20 summit in South Africa and warned Pretoria it would be excluded from U.S.-hosted events. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana said the move is a temporary measure to avoid a diplomatic crisis. Analysts warn the decision weakens Africa's voice in the G20, where South Africa is the continent's only representative. Pretoria hopes to rejoin the forum when the UK takes over the presidency in 2027. Media Director, Nigerian Citizens Association, South Africa, Oscar Emetwe, joins me live on the news from South Africa. Good to have you join us.
Thank you so much. Good to have you.
So South Africa has said this is to avoid further tension and crisis with the U.S., but how rational is this decision and what is the implication of it?
Yeah, if you ask me, I would say it does have a short-term and a long-term implication. The short term, South Africa is completely absent from the 2026 presidency. But in a longer term, if you ask me, what this portrays that now is time for us to now begin to look at not just a single country. Don't forget that South Africa is the only single member country from Africa on the bloc. But yes, we still also have the AU represented there. Now, so with South Africa absent in 2026 presidency, I think this leads the conversation around how we can now become more involved, and not just about one country, but how AU can echo the concerns of Africa instead of just one member state.
Mm. And rightly, you mentioned AU is also represented there, but just speaking in general, because at the end of the summit, what usually happens is that there is some resolution issued, which will be the guideline for what the bloc would do in the next 1 year. And now that South Africa is going to be absent, what does it mean for African representation within the G20?
Now, of course, when you say it's G20, and all of a sudden you now have G19, because technically that's what it is right now. It then weakened the credibility of G20 from its original principle or vision, which had to do with G20 represented with all regional blocs. So now, again, like I said earlier on, this is where it highlights the conversation around how about we build Africa's strong bloc, Africa's strong representation, rather than just having like one country represent us there. Yes, South Africa was there, did excellently well, echoed for debt sustainability frameworks, and also enhanced Africa engagement. They did well. But now that they're no longer there, the conversation shouldn't be a replacement, if possible, or no, it should be how do we now have that strong voice? Because in the now that we are, Africa's voice needs to be represented. We're no longer a pushover or some like we used to be treated maybe some 10, 20 years ago. Everyone could see the power, the potential on the continent. So we need to step up. AU need to step up. And then this time, bring in stronger representation, further engagement on how Africa can duly be engaged or involved in G20 conversation.
So South Africa, and I will get back to how Africa will, sort of have a voice on the in global affairs. But I want to talk about why this is. South Africa said. I was saying that you made a critical point about Africa's voice in global affairs, and I will get back to that in just a moment. But this decision, South Africa says it will ease diplomatic tensions with the United States. But let's not forget that some of those tensions came as a result of South Africa's involvement in BRICS. The issue around White Farmers and Land Use Act, and then Iran's military exercise with South Africa. So is this enough to ease that tension?
No. Ordinarily, I would say if you have such growing tension between South Africa and Washington, it's not the absence from maybe one platform that is or takes away that. But yes, like the minister actually said, this was a well thought idea currently or right now. It's definitely going to help to ease or kind of lower the tension that is currently on. But however, I believe that diplomatic engagement is how issues or concerns like this are being addressed, not necessarily being absent from one platform or the other. The two countries need to sit back and engage diplomatically to address whether it's the land act, whether it's the security concern, the genocide concerns, whatever these are, it has to be done diplomatically, not necessarily from G20 platform.
So South Africa is a middle power country. It has continued to do well in terms of how it engages on the global stage. You can argue about some of its strategy, whether it is right, whether it is the right strategy or not, but it is growing in terms of its influence. But generally around Africa, I'm not sure we can say that for most African countries. And my question is whether, in terms of building that influence around the world you mentioned and having a voice you mentioned earlier, should we do it individually as countries? Or is it time to begin to look within the African Union and create a bloc that is a formidable force around the world?
I agree with you there 100%. Like I said earlier on, this highlights where we need to now look back, introspect. How can we form a more stronger bloc? The G20 is not just any platform. The G20 comprises 85% of global GDP, 75% of global trade. And if facts read is true, 2/3 of the world's population. So in such a platform, this is not where Africa needs to be represented by just one single member country. And again, I also want to say, South Africa temporary withdrawal is not permanent. Like we rightly acknowledge in this conversation, it's just to further kind of calm down whatever the disagreement they have with Washington and just see if this can de-escalate. But much more than that, we need to have a stronger bloc. We need to have a stronger voice, a stronger institution that can actually engage and bring Africa's concerns to the table and at the place or the platform that it matters the most.
And how should we also begin to push for more representation? I know that we had that conversation during the UN 80th anniversary last year, where there was a call for a permanent seat at the UNSC, United Nations Security Council. And then there's also the push to have Nigeria in the G20. But how do we make that? I mean, what do we do to ensure that Africa has better representation across several international organizations?
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. I feel this is where, like I did echo, that we need to have a stronger bloc now. And this is where the stronger conversation, engagement around Africa comes to the table. And South Africa did well. Echoing, and then you have AU. So we're having at least two voices. One South African member country, and then you have the AU bloc representing, engaging, bringing Africa's concern to the table. But you see, the implication here is that one of those voices is now out, and now we're left with just AU. How do we go further? We only need to keep mounting the pressure, find a way to get AU to, I don't know what else they discuss, if not for African interests. I don't know how you go and sit in the room and then, again, it's not just about presence. It's not just about being in the room. It's about also influencing conversation, engagement that favors the bloc you represent. So how you ask is we need to keep engaging, keep putting it on the table. And like I did say, this is temporary. South Africa is not exiting permanently. And if that was to happen, of course, that dents the credibility of G20, and it's now G19. So I believe the more they talk, the more they engage on these issues, I'm sure at some point there will be need to have more than just one African country represented on the G20. I'm sure it will happen in the near future.
We'll see how that plays out. Thank you so much for your time. Media Director, Nigerian Citizens Association, South Africa, Oscar Emetwe.
Thank you so much.